Hello, everyone. Dan here from the Next Issue Podcast. On today's video, I'll be doing a spoiler-free review of Joker: Folie Adieu. This is the sequel to 2019's Joker by Todd Phillips. This movie is rated R with a runtime of 2 hours and 18 minutes. We'll talk about that runtime. And a Rotten Tomato score of 40% from the critics. Letterboxd average rating of 2.7. So, as you can see, this film is not as beloved as the first iteration. The first iteration has a 3.9 score on Letterboxd, which is usually what I use to gauge a little bit more of the audience. And then, of course, a lot of the critics do also keep up with that. So I think to me, it feels like a better interpretation. Um, wow, 2.7. That's very interesting. We'll definitely talk about that. I think overall, I'm a little bit higher than that. So, in this film, while struggling with his dual identity, Arthur Fleck not only stumbles upon true love, but also finds the music that's always been inside him. That's a very high level synopsis. There's definitely a lot more, as you've probably seen from the trailers. This involves the trial of the Joker after the events of the first film. This stars Joaquin Phoenix returning as Arthur Fleck, introducing Lady Gaga as Lee Quinzel. Brendan Gleeson is one of the guards at Arkham, Jackie Sullivan. Catherine Keener is Marion Stewart, who is Joker's lawyer. We also have Sassy Beats returning as Sophie, who was the neighbor and potential, or at least in his head, love interest from the first film. We also introduce Harry Lottie as Harvey Dent. You may recognize him from Industry. Actually, there's a couple of characters from Industry. The reason I think I'm gonna make probably multiple videos for this film because this is I went to the Alamo Draft House, and as you can see here, I got a sheet full of notes on both sides. So definitely a lot of things I want to talk about. But let's talk about this film. Um, First of all, I think the first film set the bar pretty high. I went back and I looked. I gave this a 4 stars on Letterboxd. I gave Joker 2019. Sorry, Joker 2019 got a 4 stars on Letterboxd, but why is it that people are not connecting with this? I think there's a lot of expectations for this film that it would just be more of what we got in the first one, and it's definitely not. That's the first thing I think the people are kind of not vibing with fully because this is a very different film. There's a lot of music to it. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's a lot slower in pace. It's a lot slower as far as the scope of the film, right? It doesn't really take us to all these places that we visited in the first film. It's a lot more confined because Arthur Fleck is in jail and he is in trial, so like it's a very small film when it comes to the scope of it. Um, I think people are just having a hard time reconciling that this is not going to be the same film that we got in 2019. It's definitely not based on anything that I would know from Martin Scorsese, whereas the first one had a lot of influences, right? Most of all, the king of comedy. Now, since the release of Joker 2019, and now I have watched the king of comedy, so I definitely understand and see all the parallels and inspiration that Phillips took. Um, but overall, although this movie was not as good as the first one in my eyes, I think I still really enjoyed it. I think there's something very interesting about this film. It's very self-indulgent when it comes to like the director. He's really This is one of those films that uh, the director is including a lot of stuff that maybe they just kind of wanted to do. They had all these kind of weird, crazy ideas. But the highlight of the film for me is the cinematography and the sets. This movie looks amazing. It looks crisp. It looks beautiful. There's some really amazing shots and transitions. Um, the set design is just great. It feels like this immediately taking us back to this grimy Gotham that is just a part of New York State, like this big city that's been left to kind of rot. And there's so many problems with it, right? With their infrastructure, there's social political problems. So like we are back in the thick of it in the city that would have created a character like Joker. But everything just really works. And then also when it comes to blending the fantasy and the reality with these big set pieces, which we'll talk about more in a minute. So overall, I think the film looks great. It's shot very well. There's a lot of really, really cool looking stuff. Like that was definitely one of the things that as I was going through the film, I was noticing down. I was writing down, down things that were interesting, and maybe I'll do a separate video that's a little bit more spoilery, where I just go over some of those highlights. But yeah, cinematography looks great. Now, that's not always a good sign when you start with the movie and you talk about the cinematography. Um, I think the performances were also very interesting, very different in a lot of ways from the first film. The introduction of Lady Gaga, I think she's great in the film, specifically when it comes to a lot of the performances. She is a performer, right? She does music for a living, so like this is, but she's also a great actress, I think. So it was definitely very interesting to kind of combine those things and try to build this new character to go head to head with Joker in this film. Every scene that those two are in together, I think it really works because they're both so talented. But also just some of the other people in the cast, like Brendan Gleeson, I really thought his character was very interesting, and actually, his character actually has a very interesting arc all throughout. Seeing some of the other performances, including I think Lee Gill, who delivers probably one of the most poignant scenes. If you remember, Lee played Gary Puddles. He was Arthur's friend who worked with him. He was a little person that he worked with, and he left him alive um, in the apartment after he stabbed that with the other dude in the first film. This is all from the first film, so no spoilers for the second one. But yeah, Lee Gill has a great scene, just like raw and hurtful. Like it was almost uncomfortable to watch, to see how much emotion can be just getting from like two characters interacting. Um, I think also Harry Lochte did really a really interesting performance as Harvey Dent. I'm gonna do a whole other video about something related to that character because obviously, if you are a fan of Batman, you know a little bit about the lore and who that character eventually becomes, or even if you've just seen The Dark Knight. All right, the musical numbers. I really like them all. I'm not the biggest musical person, but I think they really worked. I don't know that Joaquin Phoenix is the strongest singer. Whether he was, I don't know how much of that his performance was something that he really wanted to do. I think he really focuses a lot on getting some of the details right, like when it comes to looking like an emaciated prince, prisoner that has been in jail for a couple of years. He was already a skinny guy. Like his physical transformation is very impressive. But when it comes to singing, I don't know how much he was into that. I don't know how much he can really carry some of those things. Now I'm not a expert, but I when you're up against in the same in the same sequence with somebody like Lady Gaga, who is a singer, like it just makes it very obvious that not everyone is up to par when it comes to the singing. But all that being said, I really like the musical numbers. There's one that really stood out in particular. The Joker is Me. You'll definitely recognize it. That's all I'm gonna give you about that. Um, it's got a very interesting mix of like some reality stuff and some fantasy violence, of course. I think the thing that this movie lacks the most is an overall interesting story, because if you're not bought into the character of Arthur Fleck, you're not going to enjoy the story, because this is all about him and how everything kind of revolves around everything that he did in the first film, right? This movie is definitely too long, like I mentioned before, very self-indulging. There's shots that just kind of sit there for a long time. It almost feels like this is an ad for cigarettes. I think Don Draper would be proud of this film. But yeah, definitely too long. The lack of story just kind of hurts the pacing because we are living in some scenes for too long. But I don't mind the musical numbers. The movie itself actually starts with kind of a surprise, so that was kind of fun. But I think the biggest thing that separates this from the original Joker is that whereas the first film ended with a bang, this one kind of ends on a whimper. So you're not leaving on this like high rush of like, holy crap, what just happened? Instead, you're like, oh man, what the heck? Right? So and of course, because this truly feels like an ending, I read, interestingly enough, as I was leaving the theater, I saw a tweet from Todd Phillips saying that he's currently, for now, done with DC. So, I'm not expecting another Joker film, at least not for Tom Phillips. Like I said, I got a couple of videos that I want to make about maybe the future of this specific Joker universe. But yeah, that pretty much sums it up. There's a lot more stuff that I took note of, but that would go into spoilers, so I don't want to really get into it. But yeah, I think, like I mentioned, great. The movie looks great. There's some great musical performances, and overall, if you enjoyed the first one, I don't really know if you're gonna enjoy this one. I really think, I think it really depends on what you were looking for in a sequel, because it definitely subverts a lot of expectations. A lot of people, I saw somebody online saying he should have just Todd Phillips should have just homaged another Martin Scorsese film, whereas instead of kind of going all original here. So, yeah, this one's kind of a toss up, but for me overall, enjoyable. Not as good as the first one for sure, because I remember leaving the first film saying like, "Oh man, I want to go in there and watch this again." Whereas with this one, I'm like, "No, I think I can wait. I'll definitely watch it again." Probably not at the theater, but I definitely would like to see it again. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Joker 2 Folie à Deux. If you've seen the film, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. As always, thank you for watching, everyone. Remember to share, like, subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we go live. That is most Saturdays, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. And stay tuned because we have more comic reviews, trailer reactions, TV recaps, all that fun stuff in the channel. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye-bye.